Hello, my little wine introverts. This is Introvert Wine Podcast. This is still Xenia. We are at episode 12, which is called The Art of Negotiations. But before I present the episode and all the topics we've covered throughout of it, I wanted to share some news and updates from my side. Some of you might have noticed that there was no episode for almost a month, which is longer than usual, and I'll try not to do that again. But it was for good reasons. So in September, I finally got the news that I am accepted to the Institute of Masters of Wine, which is a big achievement, and I'm really thrilled and happy about it. That does come with certain responsibilities and a lot of obligations and hard work. And I also count on your love and support throughout this journey, because it's definitely not a sprint, it's a marathon. For example, on average, it takes 8 years to complete the Master of Wine program, but I do really hope that it will take me slightly less time. There are some very genius people who do it in 3 years, that's the minimum. But at least I hope that I'll be somewhere between 3 and 8. And on top of that, in September, I was part of organization crew carrying out the ASI Bootcamp, which is a sommelier intense training camp that happened in Sevilla, Spain this September. So it was an intense preparation and organization on site, very rewarding, but also not without it hiccups and difficulties. But I think it was so far one of the most successful editions of Bootcamp, and I'm personally really, really proud of this project. And I think also I didn't want to rush with this episode. Negotiations is slightly like a terra incognita for me. Like, I love to hear, to listen, to read about it, but I am in a lot of cases terrified when I am in the middle of it. So I wanted to kind of explore and dissect the art of negotiations, the different strategies, planning, theories, and maybe definitions behind it. So I'm really happy that I have the amazing Claire Berticat with me, who I know have studied and has a lot of experience in this area. And I mean, she will introduce herself, of course. And also, I think there's a lot of fun things about negotiations that maybe are more interesting or more natural to me to explore, like different cultural backgrounds that play actually a very important part in negotiations, like not only your different nationalities, but think about gender, age, education level, even such things like knowledge of different foreign languages. It all comes in this puzzle of successful negotiations. And also, I really hope you will enjoy the part where we share our experiences and different examples, because we have a lot of kind of international travels and work and projects behind our backs. So I think that's going to be very rewarding and interesting to explore. So without further ado, I leave you to enjoy and listen and learn. I'm very pleased to welcome to this episode Ms. Claire Berticat, who I had the pleasure to work with, and I have seen firsthand her doing magic in some different ways. And when I thought about having this episode about negotiations and communications, all of this fun stuff and important stuff, I thought of her immediately because of my experience and her experience as well. So very welcome, Claire, to the Introvert Wine Podcast. And can you please introduce you briefly?
First, I'm extremely pleased that you thought about me and to be invited in your podcast. So thank you about that, for thinking of me. Let me introduce myself. So I will probably share about my professional background, because this is a point of interest here. So I started to work in the wine industry back in 2006. I moved to Southeast Asia. And I started to work for a big company as a brand ambassador. And this is where I learned a lot about wine. I was based in Singapore and I traveled quite a lot in the area. I moved then to like marketing and communication field for like a communication agency specialized in wine and food. And then the last stage of that experience of 8 years was in Cambodia and Vietnam. I know this is wild. And then I moved to like some commercial jobs, and I think it was a very interesting part for me because for the first time I was like prospecting clients and working on the field and starting to make also deal and building wine list and signing agreements. So commercial for me experience is really key in what we are going to discuss here. Back in 2015, I moved back to Europe, Brussels precisely, and I decided to set up my own little consulting company because I was not a Dutch speaker also. And you need to know that in Belgium, it's a little bit complicated to find a job if you don't speak Flemish. And well, it was not easy for the first couple of years, like working as an independent. But then I started to have a few customers and I ended up working on building strategy, doing business development and marketing for some wineries and some big organization, like one you know very well, Xenia, which is ASI, and some other clients. I also today have something fun that I added to my job scope is I teach negotiation in Cage Wine School in Paris. Just, like a few hours here and then, but to the master's degree in wine and hospitality. It allowed me to go a little bit deeper in the theory. And I do write also sometimes, like every month in a magazine about wine, which is a lot of fun too.
That sounds, yeah, exciting. And well, now I think it's very clear to everybody why I have Claire here with me to talk about negotiations and maybe to kind of lay the basis of what we're going to talk. Maybe let's define what is negotiation and what are the aspects, or what are some, I don't know, maybe different definitions that you have seen in your experience.
Looking at the definition of negotiation, just looking at the Cambridge Dictionary, it just say that this is a process of discussing something in order to reach an agreement. So that's the real basic definition of negotiation, which is actually very accurate. I think in our industry, which is the wine and spirit here, and actually probably a lot of different industry, negotiation is very linked to the strategy that the company has. What I mean about strategy is like the goal of any organization for long term and, how you plan to reach that goal. Depending on, whether you are a big group or small winery, you will, of course, don't define the strategy the same way. And if we talk about, negotiation further on, it will be very different from one aspect to the other one.
So I think no negotiations and no business in the present times live in its own bubble because we live in a such global connected world. So for me, always the most curious, but also one of the most difficult parts is how you integrate the different culture aspects into the negotiation, because we do negotiate differently, because we cannot not take into account our background, our languages, our habits, all of this. So precisely using your experience in so many different cultures, how do you integrate cultural aspects in your negotiations? And if you have, obviously, any fun facts or stories to tell us.
Good point. And actually, it's very true what you just said. I like this other definition of negotiation, which was actually told by a US ambassador, because there's a lot of negotiation in diplomacy, as you can guess. He actually said that the most critical thing with negotiation is to get inside your opponent's head and figure out what he really wants. Well, let's not use opponent here because we could say business partner, that is more accurate. How can you get inside your opponent's head if you are actually not, thinking probably the same way because your background is different, because you grew up in a different environment, because the academic education was different? For sure, culture is key in negotiation. And it's not easy understanding like every culture if you haven't lived abroad or work with different business partners in the world. Just to be a bit more precise in what I say, in some culture, what we call ascriptive people, and I like this definition of what is ascriptive, which actually mean that the stature, the gender, the age, the social background are like very important to consider when you have someone in the discussion with you. So of course, in Asia, we could, see that it's quite important to consider that aspect when you are in a discussion or a negotiation with business partners. But other culture will actually consider that people are more judged on the achievement and of what they have accomplished, your performance, and that's who you are. And if you think about it in any discussion with business partners, depending on, how you feel the other person is, the discussion will not be the same way because they will not expect from you the same stories.
Yeah, no, it's really fun because also maybe bringing in the perspective of being a female in negotiations is also a different angle of how you're perceived. And I feel we both have multiple examples throughout many years of our careers. And I think the situation has changed, but I do feel like 10 years ago, for example, being a female sommelier in Kazakhstan, I was never taken seriously. And sometimes I would serve a table of guests who are all female, probably high status, and they would ask the administrator to call somebody older, probably male and more experienced. And the administrator had to come back many times to them and tell them she's professional, like she knows her stuff, she's your best guide in the wine. But they would still have this perception that I'm too young, I'm a girl, and that does not already at the start, even before you start speaking, has less credibility for them. So you negotiating or selling them the wine would not have the same effect, which I found really funny. And I didn't have the same experience in all the countries I lived, but I remember still those experiences and how they made me feel. But I feel the society has changed a bit. So I can relate maybe to the Asian market since Kazakhstan is more Asian in this cultural aspects than European. So that really does matter. And sadly, there's not a lot of things you can change in how you look and how you behave. But yeah, it was just a fun example from my side.
I think when you are a female, you have to fight twice. And if you are a male, to be taken seriously. I remember putting some glasses on to try to look older
Cool.
when I was based in Asia. Because anytime we were in a discussion, especially when, I was based in Cambodia and I had to really discuss about agreement with some customers. Even if I was like the manager, sometimes the business partner were actually looking at the male sitting next to me. Also, if we come back to, for instance, Asian culture, but we are not here, of course, to talk only about Asian culture. It's very interesting to discuss like German culture or Scandinavia and US, and we can go to there quickly after. But in the culture in Asia with Chinese mainly, the relationship is key. It really means that if you want to make a deal, let's say with some big wine distributors in Asia, what is most important is that you have to gain the trust of the business partners. Basically, they need to like you, and you are establishing a relationship, for long term. It's complicated to discuss price quickly. First, they will take you to dinner, they will take you to karaoke, maybe. You will have to comply with them, which means like drink, drink, drink. I don't want to go into cliche. I'm just sharing a little bit of the experiences that I have. But on the other hand, let's say you have a discussion with US business potential partners, right? Or potential clients. Well, it's actually often that it can go not into a fight, but that you can speak actually up and be very firm. And price is a key question. It's like you need to discuss like right away. And if they sign the contract, there's no coming back on the contract. It's like, the deal is done. But culturally speaking, there's no emotion to make in a business agreement that you have with US. I think it's the same with German. The culture puts the emotion on the side, and you need to be, very firm in the conversation.
Yeah, I feel like I'm very maybe European or Western in my approach because I had experiences with some of the South American clients that I've sent them the conditions and the presentation and the prices right away, and they were offended that I didn't take my time to actually discuss and talk and build this rapport with them. Versus, in my opinion, I was saving each other time that they can see clearly what are the options, what are the prices, at least the level of pricing and the conditions before we even start kind of building this relation. So it was also a learning for myself, but it's a good experience.
For French, for instance, they need to feel you as an individual. It's really important. Also, I would not compare to Chinese, for instance, but it's true that people matters. If you don't feel, if you don't think the trust is here, and if you put price in front of them, like right now, it's not. It's. I agree with you. It can be offending. And in English-speaking countries, without making cliche about like Australia being the same as Canada, for instance, but I do think that it's more okay to be more direct in the way you want to discuss. If I had some discussion with some wine regions while I was, in charge of building some partnership for big competition, I can tell you that working with some Portuguese, for instance, and going to California people and then moving to Sake Association from Japan, each discussion was very, very different. And I think the most thrilling part that I liked was actually to try to see what are their strategy and what do they have in mind and how can I help? How can we help? Negotiation to me is not a fight. I do believe that that's, a solution that can benefit to both parties, and that's a win-win. It should be a win-win.
Ideally, yes. I'm curious again from because it sounds indeed like a very difficult process that requires a lot of preparation and understanding and taking time and not just, like putting yourself immediately there and trying to solve all the problems as they come. Do you have any practical tips or things that helped you personally to have the negotiations as a more pleasant experience or a more positive experience for you?
Being an introvert or an extrovert actually can play on the way maybe you can conduct a discussion. And I'm a bit teasing you, Xenia, because of the name of this podcast, but it's true that the natural skill or characteristic of a person can play here. But if I could give an advice, if you want to work in this industry and goes into some job that could be close to what I'm doing today, what helped me is I had a 360 degrees experience in the wine, more or less. It means I've seen what it is to work on the field. I've seen how to build wine lists, how to make agreement with hotel. I've been on the communication side. I do think that all departments should work together in order to, like reach the right strategy. And when you understand that, you need to put empathy in the discussion you have with the business partners and actually try to get what they really want. And when you've been working, on the other side like them, I think it's easier to actually get what they want. And if you listen, if you smile, if you keep firm, but you stay humble and you actually show them that you're here to help, but you also here to benefit to your own company. And well, I think it can work. I don't find this that complicated, but it's maybe because I'm getting older now.
Now you're getting more experience and mature. That's the
Yeah, let's
approach.
say that.
Yeah, but coming back to the introvert side, I always thought that it is very difficult for me as an introvert to be in the negotiations because it takes a lot of energy and resources. Because I do feel that I've seen negotiations as a fight, and you kind of prepare and gear up to actually to fight for to stand your ground, which now I understand also maybe getting a bit older that it is not the way how it should be. It is not the way how you feel about it. It is not the way how you should enter because I think the opponent can sense that how you behave.
Well, negotiation, I mean, discussion. I like the word discussion in order to reach an agreement, right? That's the definition of it. Should not be a fight, but I'm not saying it's never a fight.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that the most complicated examples I can give without dropping names, that would be funny to drop names here. Um, that
Yeah,
had
it's
to
gonna
be,
reach the followers,
yeah.
to be scandal.
I think the most complicated, experience I can share is when you sign a contract and when you agreed on, a list of, tasks or benefits and counterparts that should happen, and when actually the business partner is not following what has been signed. Then this is very frustrating because, well, the way I work is I'm really sharp and trying really to follow what has been agreed. But it's always okay to get a little bit out of the contract because, sometimes you can be a little flexible and not everything can be signed. And that's also building the relationship. But it needs to be both ways. And this is where sometimes it can get frustrated and maybe not a fight, but an argument, I would say.
Hmm. Yeah, I think naturally we as human beings, we try to avoid conflict. It is a very, I think, yeah, natural thing to do is try to not create conflicts or stay out of them or ignore them. So that's why maybe negotiation is difficult for a lot of
But
people.
that's very true what you say. And I think that most of the people don't want to negotiate because they want to be nice. And of course, everyone wants to be nice, but like getting a deal is not about not being nice. That's what I feel, but sometimes it is complicated. I would not say you need to be nice, but probably you need to be brave sometime. It takes a little bit of courage to, especially when you're female and you look young, or then you need to be brave twice in order to be, like taken seriously and make sure like on the other side, they actually are okay to follow the proposition. So that's what I would say. It's not always
Mm.
easy.
I've heard, I don't remember if there is a specific author or kind of person who is responsible for the saying that you always need to come up with three possible outcomes of any negotiation, like the one which is negative for you, the one which is kind of neutral, and the one which is most positive, like the most that you can get out of this negotiation. It feels also a bit cliche that you can prepare them in advance and you cannot settle for the one that is negative. You aspire, of course, and you want to reach which is the maximum, the most positive one. But in the end, in most cases, you settle at the neutral one, which should be kind of win-win situation to both parties. But what you said about being flexible and adapt to the situation during the negotiation as it kind of evolves and unfolds, I think it is actually more important rather than coming with the set proposals and being like, no, I stick to this and I will not change because I already kind of have the scenarios in my head and will not want to kind of move away from them, which I think limits yourself like in a lot of possible outcomes and can be one of the ways why you cannot even reach final agreement with your partner.
To reply about that point, I will come back to my previous experience in export. For instance, let's say you are a big group and you have a lot of brands as a wine company. If you are dealing with, let's say, entry-level wine, and you have to sign a deal with a big retail company in Japan, I don't know. Negotiation is tough, and it will be complicated to get everything you ask because we're talking about figures here. We're not talking about emotions, I would say. It's hard to get everything you want, so negotiation should be also about compromise. Like you say, being flexible here, it's compulsory because you fix target with your business partner, but what if they don't reach the target? Are you going to kick them out and look for a new distributor? Well, no, this is a long-term partnership, and it means that you also need to help and to support. There's different kind of support. You can support with marketing material, most of the time they will not really care about marketing material. They will actually ask for discount, or if I buy like 12 cases of wine, I need to have one free and I can use that to sample, blah, blah, blah. So that's a lot of discussions. But if you're working for a premium brand, everyone knows, like in a big wine company, most of the time the cash is coming from the entry level wine or from the medium level wine, and they are reinjecting this cash to actually build the top of the pyramid, which are the premium wines. And the premium wines are the one that actually needs the most investment, because
Mm-hmm.
here you're not talking about small figures, I mean big figures and small price. You're selling emotion, you're selling
Mm-hmm.
story. You need to have a winemaker. You need to think out of the box. Like, I am Grange from Penfold. I am, the top wine of Famille Perrin, Beaucastel. I am the top wine, Sassiskaya. I mean, we're not talking about business partnership that are discussed in an office. We're really
Mm-hmm.
talking about allocation, selling emotion. Scarcity actually can be also one of the tools to reach your strategy. Unique, unique wines like that will definitely not have the same negotiation than if you're talking about big groups and entry level wines.
I feel personally a little bit sad that a lot of people see compromise as something weak, as a weakness. Whereas to me, it should be more appreciated as a two sides trying to reach an agreement that will work for both. But there is a lot of kind of, again, discussions, and maybe that's more into psychology, that they feel like compromise is actually not what neither of sides want it, so they feel not happy with the outcome, but maybe it can be a start of future development. So I think that compromise should be appreciated more as a result of negotiation. And I really loved your examples with different levels, because we are finally talking about wine business as well. At different levels of products of wine, that you can use different strategies of negotiation. And I have experience also with a big corporate alcohol beverage company, that they clearly knew what their strength and what their weaknesses. And the wine portfolio was not their strength, but the spirits was. So they would enter into negotiation with their spirits and being like, we're the best, we rule the market, you need to listen to us. And then kind of squeeze in their wines, which were maybe not very strong or not very strong on that particular market, but they had their strength and spirits to support the maybe not so developed side of their business, to going to ease into these negotiations, which I admired a lot, and I learned a lot from that experience. So there was a lot of seeing the strategies and how they work in wine, because as you said, wine is not the same product as everything else. There is a lot of intangible in wine, which you cannot always monetize or put in numbers or put in prices as well, because there is a lot of storytelling, history, this kind of lifestyle as well, that doesn't always equal the money or the something put on paper, in my experience at least.
I think compromising is not losing. I don't see anything that you lose in compromising. Compromising is actually making both parties happy. But then I agree with you. First, the spirits industry is very different from the wine industry. I think it's not the same world. Negotiation is key. I'm not talking about the fine spirits, like the new handcrafted spirit that you can find now, very trendy in a lot of markets. Here we're talking, of course, about the big groups, the big names, and how much cash they can bring to the company. And yes, that's totally true that negotiation here can be not about compromise. It could be, if you want my brand, you also have to take some of my wines, for instance. But again, we're talking about big groups. And if you think about the wine industry, in volume, these groups represent a lot of shares, but you have so many business models in wineries that are so different than groups, that we could talk about how these groups negotiate, but it's not the common measure. But négociant in Bordeaux could be also a bit similar. In Bordeaux, the place, but La Place de Bordeaux is very famous for the way, they also, negotiate with, very big groups. And if you take that fine wine, you also need to take my branded wine that I put
Hmm.
under my
Hmm.
négociant name. So, well, from one business to another one, negotiation will be different. But in my personal experience, and this is because I am Claire and I'm not someone else, I always had to believe in what I was selling in order to convince the customers. Some people that are maybe sharks, I would say, but that's not a real, really nice to say that. But those who are really here to sell because they have high target and a lot of pressure, they will not have the same kind of negotiation, and compromise might not be enough. That's for sure. So it depends on the challenge.
Oh, I really love this comment about the belief in what in your product, in wine or whatever product, because you can feel it. You can really feel if you're just talking to somebody, even not negotiations, so like outside. If you meet somebody and you ask, "What do you do?" and person starts explaining to you what is the business or what he or she does. If they have this passion, this spark, you kind of more inclined to trust them and you like the product already a little bit more, which is a very powerful tool, I think. And specifically now that you can connect it to negotiations, it certainly makes a huge difference. And I have had this on both sides, on me working for some brands, and a lot of people were seeing the loyalty and the belief and the passion I have for the product. And I felt that those negotiations were not easier, but they had a different atmosphere. They felt lighter because then there is both parties interested in working together so that you can overcome maybe some of the disagreements or different opinions, but that does make a lot of difference. So that's a
Mhm.
really good point. Really like it.
And when I say you need to believe in the product you're selling, I want to be clear on something. It doesn't mean that the product you're selling or the wine you're selling is the one you will drink at home, right? Because I have been quite good in selling, well, could be business deals or just a wine to a restaurant or a hotel, because that was the product they needed for the audience. Do you know what I mean? It's like you help them to reach their strategy with the right product. So it
Mhm.
can be also an entry level product from, whatever country, could be France, could be Chile, I mean, whatever, but that I will personally not drink. But I do feel that that will be an interesting margin for them. That
Good
will be
solution.
a
Mhm.
good by the glass, a good solution. And the customers are actually expecting that kind of good value for money, and that's what they should take. And I think this is important to take into account, that your personal taste or your personal wish should not be taken into account when you sell something or when you're in a negotiation. It's more like how can we both benefit to each other, and understanding the needs of the other party too.
It's a very good point. So in your again in your experience in your personal journey in the wine business, for to be a good negotiator, communicator, what kind of knowledge is helpful? When we're speaking maybe also academic background, like any degrees, certifications, because we spoke a lot of experience-based skills that you gain, but do you have any advice for our followers, for our wine introverts, of what can help them from this side as well to become a better communicator and negotiator?
I think there's two different kind of person. There's probably those in the wine industry that like have always wanted to work in wine. And then probably what they will choose, as a either business school or whatever they want to study, will be quite soon directed to wine. My personal case is different. I was not meant originally to work into wine, even though my dad is a wine drinker coming from, like southwest of France next to Bordeaux, and I've been raised in a wine education family. But I studied like economics and business administration, and I took a major in marketing, and I was not so sure. So I actually moved to Singapore originally to work for a big group that happened to be in the wine and spirit industry. And I actually loved the product. So my background is more like just business school and with no major in wine. I trained myself a lot on my own because I really wanted to be taken seriously again. Because, as a young woman in this industry, you need to know how to talk about the products. When I came back to Europe, I was crazy enough to decide to actually go for a viticulture and enology degree, which is not compulsory. I don't want everybody to freak out and like you need to take an enology degree to work in this industry. That's just me setting up my consulting firm and being a bit worried that, wineries might not believe that, I have enough knowledge about the product to consult for them. So it was really tough. Like it was long distance. It was a lot of training, a lot of study. I had to go in the vineyard every 6 weeks while I was based in Brussels. But that's my own background. So not everyone should do that because today a lot of certification exists, around wine. So whether you are coming from a wine school or a business school, I would say you can decide if you want to go for WSET, if you want to be a ASI sommelier, if you want to. There's a lot of things, a lot of books you can train yourself. And I think to be really in the business of wine, it's interesting to start first by a generic business school and maybe move to like a master's degree that is oriented to wine, but it's not compulsory. You can also train yourself on the side. So I hope I replied the question.
No, I mean it is interesting how different people come into the wine business from what sides and what brings them. Because I think I spoke it into my first episode because depending in what part of wine business you work, that will define what knowledge do you need and want to acquire. Because if you are a marketing manager, you need other skill set versus a sommelier that works on the floor. And the same for negotiations. Yes, of course, to build this respect and your own knowledge and your own, skill set to work in wine, of course, you need to know not even the basics, but quite a lot. But it doesn't require to be a master of wine to work as a sales manager. Absolutely no. So there is a mix of course, some education behind because that gives you the foundation to continue. And then whatever side of business you love, it's very different what a winemaker knows and what a marketing manager or wine writer also knows.
I can say that you have very different kind of people in the wine industry, whether again, I know I come back always to that, but whether you're working for a big group or big negociant, for instance, or you're working for smaller wineries. And I've noticed something in big groups, people on the marketing department, most of them don't know about wine. They might come from the perfume industry or from the luxury industry, and then they are moved to marketing because they work for big spirits brand or champagne brand, and it's a very different kind of marketing. Same for some negociants, probably not all of them, but in the marketing area. But if you are medium-sized wineries and you have someone actually working to build the image of your wine that don't know anything about wine, that would be complicated. Sommelier is again a different business because some sommelier have no like firm academic background being a sommelier. I mean, there's more and more training about it, but I don't think a lot of them are actually coming from business schools. And that's a discussion we've had a lot in the past. It's if you're a sommelier and you want to leave the floor and you do not have an academic background that is actually helping you to find some other jobs, is it easy or complicated? Because not all of them are the best sommelier of, like the world and can go into consultancy. So it's really wide into the spectrum of wine jobs that you can have.
Well, we are also very big snobs in the wine business, so the more you know, the more it helps. A lot, specifically in our business. I feel maybe it's the same in fashion and perfume. I was not very involved in those, but I feel like in wine we're specifically snobbish. But what
Too
helped me
snob,
through
too
oh
snob,
yeah.
that's for sure.
what really helped me from all the different educations and degrees and certifications is the network, because you build a lot of contacts, and specifically for negotiations that can be useful for you, because you can, if you haven't worked yourself in all the aspects of the wine industry, then you can have somebody who has this experience, who and who can maybe you discuss privately of their experience. But that has helped me a lot in terms of this network building and in all aspects of the wine, because you never know who you're going to meet at the WSET courses. For example, I've met really diverse group of people. Some of them are chemistry professors, some are sommelier, obviously, some are salespeople. So all of this also kind of builds my expertise a little bit, because we discuss and I learn from them, and I can understand as well their needs, as you said, while you're negotiating something. So that if you are considering, for example, if you need to have one degree or one certification, that certainly adds to kind of your expertise and your knowledge and your network.
I know how many certifications you have. Trust me, I don't have as many as you. And I would not say on my personal case that certification helped me to build a network. It's getting drinks with the people actually after, after the meeting. Well, I do believe that even if there are some snob people in the wine industry, it's also a warm industry. We are talking about hospitality here. And most of the time, when you have business meetings, then you can have dinner or you can have a wine dinner with professionals. And as we say, most of the deals can be made off record. It's like, we discuss after or we have a last drink. I'm not pushing anyone to drink alcohol here, but, we are in the wine and spirit industry. But I do think that being friendly in this industry is extremely important to gain the trust of people. And I think this was also one of, my quality or my skill when I started working in Asia is I met friends. And in this industry, when you start making friends, you have friends for life, and we can help each other because you always meet people of the wine industry everywhere. If you go to some wine exhibition, if you go to any wine networking event, you always ended up seeing someone that you've met somewhere, and so yeah, you can make a lot of friends and ultimately maybe business partners at the end.
Yeah, I feel like it's a very small world, but the wine world is even smaller. So you can see and meet the people that you know or that know somebody for sure at any kinds of events for sure. Well, I think that was a very insightful and very interesting conversation for me personally, because I already learned and noted some tips from Claire from today's lecture on art of communication and negotiation. So thank you very much for being here, for taking your time and bringing your expertise and your knowledge to this podcast. I really enjoyed this episode.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Xenia. It was a nice surprise when you asked, and I do hope that everyone listening to this will learn something and easy to reach me. I love to discuss about any topics about wine and business, so feel free, and sending you a lot of hugs to you, Xenia, and to everyone.
Well, that was it for episode 12. Art of Negotiations with Claire Berticat. I cannot, I think, thank Claire more for dedicating her time and all her preparation and sharing all of her experiences, and really enjoyed us talking about real life examples and something we did in the past or are doing now or participated. So I think when you have practical examples and somebody with experience of actually doing some projects or living through the topics they're talking about, I think that adds the value to the topic, and I really, really enjoyed it. I hope you've learned or picked up some interesting things, or at least know in what direction you want to explore or dig further. As Claire said, she's open to your messages on LinkedIn or Instagram, whatever you want. I am also obviously very open to continue this topic if you want to discuss it further, because I feel like there is different layers and different ways to talk about in future. So thank you for listening to this episode. I know it's a bit longer than usual, but I also did not want to cut parts of our discussions because I feel that they kind of continue and move and flow very naturally and continue the thought. And it was a very fruitful discussion for myself. So I will come back sooner than in September with the future episodes. So stay tuned for the future topics to come. I think we're going to have some fun topics to explore this fall. And as usual, like, share, subscribe, depending where you're listening to this episode. You can rate it, you can send it to your friends. Each download, each new follower, each new subscription matters a lot for me in spreading the love of wine and talking about being an introvert in the wine world. Thank you so much. I'm gonna see you very soon. Ciao.